We're going to talk about the future of accounting, specifically around autonomous accounting. And we'll spend about 20 minutes. And primarily what we'll talk about are the changes that are happening in the field of finance around automation, transformation, the scope of what lies ahead. We'll help folks understand how other functions like marketing and sales and HR are leading the technology-driven transformation, and primarily focus around things like operational efficiency and user experience. We also want to talk about why it's important for finance to adapt to these changes, be relevant as not only as an advisor to the business, but more importantly, stop some of the transaction processing functions that are happening today. So as we move to the next slide, as always, there's three levers of things that folks talk about when it comes to any change. And it's no different in accounting. So we'll talk about three things: the people, who are the who, and how do we upskill, and what do we do with the team, which the folks that we're just on did a great job of. We'll talk about a little bit on the process, the how. So how do I go about these digital strategies and business outcomes? But most importantly, we'll spend on the technology, the what. So how do I leverage the things that are on the market? What are the things that are important? The processes, the tech. How do we talk about adoption to be more strategic than tactical? And one of the things that I thought was funny as we were putting this together is somebody said a lot of people use this process as like duct tape. So we're going to talk about how to do it differently than duct tape, and not just put it together, but to build an action plan on how to get the business to strategically reposition around what's happening in the digital economy. So those are what we're going to talk about. And as we look at it, I know finance and accounting are looking at and saying, well, are we ready for it? Should we be doing it? Are there tools out there? Are we worried that this is going to make us less relevant, or all of all of the standard things that people look at when they're putting in technology? And so what we wanted to do is spend some time talking about how some of the other departments have gone about it, and how they've done the journey and what success they've had in doing it. So if you look at, there's a couple groups that have done a very good job, like marketing. Marketing has actually done a really good job of thinking about how do we take these business processes and add automation to them. So here's some examples on the right-hand side. So, how do they automate the online buyer's journey? How do they automate the email campaigns? How do they automate the digital marketing, opportunity management, all of those things that are super important to marketing? Because as we know, as finance professionals, some of the biggest spend we have are around sales and marketing. And so marketing has done a good job in taking these and automating them and making them easier. Making them easier, but let's just take them each one by one and just kind of go through them, and then talk about like what was the pre and then what was the post. But if you look at like the online buyer journey, so something like the target list that folks would do, it used to be that someone in marketing had a list, a stack of leads, or they had a spreadsheet where they were saying, hey, let me go find all of the folks that are under 200 million in revenue, who are in Arizona or in California, and I want to go, pull that list or go figure out who that is. And now that's all done through tools that have been built for automation. Something like the campaigns. So the ability to say, hey, in the old days, we would just say, hey, we're going to be able to do a 10% off coupon, and we're going to send that to everybody. And whether they were early or mid or whatever it may be, we're going to send that to everybody and just send that out as kind of a blanket. And now there's tools out there that can specifically say, well, if they're in this point in the journey, we'll send out a different message. And if they're later, we'll send out something different. And if they're a different role, we'll send out something different altogether as well. And so we've seen great movement from the marketing folks and the marketing team. And so I think finance can learn from that. I think finance can learn from how did marketing do it? What were the things that they measured? How did they think about putting the tools in, et cetera? So the reality is that finance is ready. Finance and accounting, the CFOtech group, they're ready to go make this transformation, to do stuff, and they've started to identify and started to take the lead from sales and marketing and do some things to help automation. And so it's not that they haven't embraced it and haven't started. And so we've got some good examples of areas where we've started to see automation. So one of them being in expenses. So this has always been, as a CRO, I was always getting calls during the close process. Could you please have your reps put in their expense reports? Oh, by the way, they put them in and they don't fill them out right. And it was just, they became the department of no, or CF no is one of the things that we always were being accused of. But the systems have done a good job now of being put in. And although they're not fully autonomous and running on their own, they've done a really good job of augmenting what's done in from the finance team. So instead of the people doing the expense reports, instead of looking for the anomalies or looking for the issues with them, they're trying to help folks get them paid timely and get them fixed right, not add more work, not add more pain and problems, but make it so that it's easier to work with and easier to get that in. And there's other areas where you see that. So T&E is certainly one that's an easier process. On the RevRec, folks are starting to use tools that are automating RevRec processes and doing things to figure out the long poles in the tent around services revenue, the long pole in the tent around ASC 606 for subscription revenue. And so the good news is we've actually seen a good start for finance to be able to say, okay, we've done some of these low-hanging fruit. What else can we pick off? What else can we think about that we want to then take on and make sure that we're answering? And as you look at the data in the market on the future, it is going to be the thing that's going to help. Like we did a study and looked at research, and on the close process, the record to report process, folks on average that didn't use a tool, that just did it manually, they closed in like 8 days. Folks that use a tool for automation closed in like 6 days. So there was really nice savings and nice time savings in terms of a couple days. But the question becomes, what else can you do? What are other areas that in the future are going to be automated? And according to McKinsey, you can see the big bold number there. Near 80% of all of the accounting operations that are going to be done will have the ability to be automated. And then you can see kind of the sub where they think the big areas are. So almost 40% in tax and almost 40% in financial controls. And so there's some really good areas that can be taken on and extended from the things that we're already doing. The areas around the expense reporting and the RevRec. We can look at other areas where we say, hey, what else can we work on to go achieve this 88%? But the 80% is actually long, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done. So we've got a long way to go, but here's some areas where folks can focus on. And you can see on the right side of the chart, there's some more transactional areas, and then we get into more of the strategic. And so part of what's really good about this split is, if you look at why you would do it. So at the top side, we can automate processes for the user experience, get better around operational efficiency, get tighter controls, and those are around the more transactional areas. So general accounting, so processing invoices, example would be things like processing invoices, doing anomaly for omissions and errors, certainly cash disbursement. I mentioned revenue management. And these areas are all available to go after and apply some level of automation around. And then once those are done, then you can get into some really strategic, what it gives you the ability to do is get into some more strategic areas where you can focus on that are value add. So things like treasury and risk management and audit. And so think about finally being able to develop a digital binder during the close process that you had to the auditors versus a ton of work papers or a ton of Excel spreadsheets that you're working on that you then hand to that audit team. And so that's what we're talking about in terms of automation. And there are a number of areas and a number of pieces of automation that are on the market. And we really break them down into 4 areas. So as you start to think about how do I go about doing this, or what's the what and what I do, the first place you really start is around process. So what are the areas in my business that I can think about making easier? And I gave you a couple at the beginning, well, a couple slides ago. So expense management, that's one of the ones that companies have started to say, hey, I don't want to do it just because I'm tracking or because I want to make sure that, we put the dollars in the right bucket, but can I use tools that have a good interface for my users so that people want to do it and be part of the process? And so it's about automation, it's about workflow, it's about making the user experience much better for the end users, and therefore something that folks on the team, the sales, the marketing, the traveling folks will actually want to do. So that's really the first level, is process automation. The next one is RPA, or robotic process automation. And so what that's then doing is taking some of these more robotic or tasks that happen on a regular basis and automating them from the perspective that the computers, the robots are running them. And so there's really good examples of that, things like booking automatic journals or automatic accruals, or doing approvals where it's high volume, there's lots of them. It's something that you can capture and figure out fairly easily to say, yep, this is something we do every month. And what it then allows to happen is you do get more efficient in doing it. And what that allows is to free folks up to do more value add tasks. This is part of how you get to that level. And then the next one, which is really the big buzz and what folks are talking about tremendously, is this whole machine learning, artificial intelligence, the ability for the computer to apply some judgment or some knowledge to the process that folks know and that have been doing, and making decisions, based on predictions. And so if you look at the market, there's a ton of tools out there that have done a good job in teaching people about machine learning and artificial intelligence. We have tons of bots that we can ask questions of, and they come back and get answers. And what you're starting to see is people are now training these for finance and for accounting. And I remember someone had told me a few years ago, if you ask Alexa what EBITDA is, you'll get a country off the coast of Africa. That's the answer that you get back, primarily because it needs to be trained. And so now you're starting to see training around anomaly detection is probably the first, things like errors and omissions. So did I get an invoice? When the invoice, that would be a simple example of an omission. An example of an error would be, this is coded to a prepaid when it shouldn't be. And so we're starting to see really, really strong evidence of areas where folks are applying this in terms of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And then lastly, the ability to deploy packaged applications around this, bundling up the process automation, bundling up the RPA, bundling up the machine learning. And what's happening is they're taking these components, just like we've seen, and they're taking these components and they're making them easier to work with, and they're making them bundled up so that we can use them and deploy them faster. So much easier experience in terms of deploying the product, and much faster time to value versus trying to build it or code it internally. And so that's what we're seeing in the marketplace. In terms of what Highradius is doing, so we've applied this in a number of different areas across our suite. So you'll notice we use the word autonomous to describe each of the different areas. And we've applied this whole concept of joining AI and ML, joining robot process automation, in these package suites. So in the order to cash area, you can see 5 different applications that make it easier to go out and do the job. And we love to talk about it in terms of some of the solved areas and some of the unsolved areas. And so if you look at the bottom in terms of autonomous accounting, I think there's a number of companies, including Trintech, have done a very good job of solving the get me out of Excel, give me a closed dashboard, automate these processes. And so certainly those are things that we're looking to do as well. Part of what we're adding is, if you think about this robot process automation, and you apply it to the closed process, some of the things like automatic bank rec. So if you've done it once, can we teach the software to do it each time, and then hand that to the folks for approval versus for finding it? And so Highradius has spent a lot of time thinking about these unsolved areas and solved areas to then apply them into each of these. And you could see the real focus is to consolidate under the office of the CFO, build a platform, build products for that, and make sure that we think of ourselves as the leader as it comes to this augmented or autonomous ability. And there's some folks who've done it. So we've seen very, very good experiences from folks, very, very good stories about how companies have taken these areas and automated them. And so these 2 examples are primarily around collections and around cash. But if you look at like Staples, they had 7 people doing collections, and each one of them had 900 to 1,000 folks that they were trying to collect from. And on top of that, when they came in and we spoke to them, their comment was, we have some folks who, some of our customers are 1,000 days out in their collection. And if you just think about 1,000 people and how you would manage that, it's mind-bending. But they were able to apply each of these components. So first, start with a packaged application that specializes and is taught how to do it. Add in the ability to then find the ones that are likely to pay, find the ones that are using the software, and apply a bunch of different technology to it. And as you can see, some incredible results for them, just in terms of reduction bad debt, DSO. And so very good success story of a company that took this and said, hey, we're going to automate. And so although we talked about the future, in some ways, the future is actually here with folks who are doing this. Danone is another one. And this one, what everybody talks about is just how manual the whole process was: manual remittance, manual cash collections, and using these off-the-shelf packaged applications. Again, they were able to get some really good benefits in terms of generating benefit for the company by applying these autonomous softwares. So thank you. Appreciate the 20 minutes that you folks have given.